All good now.
Well,
So I'd like to start these with you telling me, your name, when you were born, and where you were born, and we can go from there.
okay. My full name is William Wirt Wolfe. I was born in February 27th, 1941 in Clarksburg, West Virginia. And at that time, my father was a principal of a small high school in Sardis, which was a small little town outside of the Clarksburg area.
What was the name of the high school? Was it just Sardis?
Sardis, it was just Sardis High School.
Gotcha.
And he was still in the teaching profession when I was born. My mother was from Beverly, West Virginia, and a very interesting lady in the respect that she was sort of a professional woman in her day. She had convinced the governor of Maryland, governor of West Virginia at that time,
Governor Cup.
that she wanted to start a high school at the Industrial Home for Girls in Salem, West Virginia. They only went through the 8th grade there. And that was her master's project, thesis at WWII.
What was your mother's name?
Mother's name was Christine Wolfe.
Christine Yoakum. Okay. And your father's name?
Selby Campbell Wolfe.
Selby Campbell. Okay.
They were native, my dad was native of Harrison County. Interestingly enough, in the 1783 census, the first census of the United States, his family passed through Beverly area and lived off the Stanton-Parkersburg Turnpike. At that time, it may not have been called that, but they lived on Bear Creek, which is a drain of the Tygart River. They had a mill there. Stayed for a few years and then went west. They were German immigrants to this country. And being German immigrants, they didn't have much to tell anybody. They were not revealing much because at that time, the people were seeking land that cost nothing. They settled here, right of settlement.
Right.
They didn't have to pay anything for the land. And I'm sure Beverly, the settlers here, the same thing. They settled here with no deeds or any recorded deeds in the very beginning, and then as we started progressing, people started getting deeded land. So that was the beginning of the Germans coming to the western part of the United States from Europe, fleeing the feudal system in Europe. The Protestant Reformation had occurred 200 years prior to that, and the people were leaving Europe in shiploads. There were ship captains who had a career of just transferring people back and forth from Europe to the United States. And well, it was actually at that time the colonies.
Right.
They'd get off the ship, swear allegiance to the colony or to the crown, and they landed in Philadelphia. And they said, go west. And off they went. And so they ended up in Lancaster County for a spell, and then moved south to Frederick, Maryland, where they had a deeded place there. They had a deeded piece of land, but they wanted more land. They were farmers and came west and ended up here in what was Augusta County, Virginia then.
Right. Where we get our Augusta name.
That's where that comes from.
So your mother and father lived in Clarksburg, but I want to figure out real quick, since we're doing this in the Lemuel Chenoweth House, I want to figure out how you're related to Lemuel Chenoweth.
Okay.
Yeah.
On my mother's side, my mother's grandmother, her name was Christina Margaret Chenoweth, was a daughter of Lemuel. And that was my mother's grandmother.
Do you remember when Christina Margaret was born, what her birth year was?
I don't have it before me. It's in the book your father.
Yeah, I'll look it up.
It will give us the date. She was about the third or fourth child in line.
Right.
Several died along after that. But my grandmother was the granddaughter of Lemuel Chenoweth. And I might, just a side note, mention that I went with my grandmother to the 100th anniversary of the building of the bridge in Philippi.
Oh, did you?
And that she was the oldest surviving granddaughter or grandchild
At that time,
at that time.
what was her age approximately?
She was 82.
82. Oh, wow.
I always went everywhere with grandmother. I was her companion, so she wouldn't get lost.
That was nice of you.
But anyway, we went to that celebration, hottest day in July, you can imagine, and grandmother had a heat stroke. And here I am, I'm 12 years old, by myself with my grandmother, before the day of cell phones. Telephone numbers back then were 3 digits.
Right, right.
And so they take her over to the Meyer Clinic in Philippi. And finally I get in contact with my aunt in Beverly, who had dropped us off there and we had to go somewhere. And finally I get her, and then I get a hold of my dad, and they come back, and we get grandmother squared away well enough so we can go back home, and she survived it for another year.
She survived the stroke for another year.
For a year. Well, she
Wow.
came out of the stroke. She didn't have any noticeable weakness or any of that sort of thing, but she did die a year later from a stroke.
Did she die in the Philippi area or
Grandmother died in Clarksburg.
in Clarksburg? Sorry.
She stayed with us. My mother passed away in 1947 from a cerebral hemorrhage. And
You said you were six at the time.
6 years old. And up until that time, we spent a lot of time up here in Beverly. My uncles were away in World War II in the early part of the 40s. And grandmother was by herself quite a bit.
Mm.
And Aunt Virginia was up here. She was working, so my mother would spend as much time as she could up here. And a lot of times I would just stay with grandmother as companion. So she would have company. Next door to the home she had, the Yoakum home,
Right.
my great uncle lived there, Bruce Yoakum. He lived in his father and mother's home. And Uncle Bruce was, a nice, he treated me like I was a grandson.
Now, are you talking about this home right here?
No, it's the Edward Hart home,
The Edward Hart
right
home.
next door to grandfather and grandmother.
Gotcha. Okay.
Anyway, Uncle Bruce lived there, and he died in 44. I spent time in that house. I lived in that house because he needed some companionship when my mother was up here.
Mm.
I would stay with him.
Hmm.
And I loved that house. Really interesting place.
So as a kid, you spent a lot of time in Beverly. So did you know my dad when you were a kid?
I didn't.
Probably not.
But I'm trying to figure this out a little bit. I don't know your dad's connection, how it comes down. I've always wondered if he had anything to do with Randolph Parsons. Well, that's where I think, we need to do a little investigating.
We do, yeah. Yeah, sorry, that was getting sidetracked.
I've got a pretty clear line of descendancy in my side of the family.
Yeah.
We go all the way back to John Hart, the signer, of course. Edward Hart was his son.
Right.
And then Joseph Hart was the son of Edward. And then Edward's daughter, Nancy, married Lemuel.
Right, exactly.
And that's how my line then filters on down through Christina Margaret.
So you come from the Hart side. I come from Revolutionary War John Chenoweth's side.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Understood.
So I'm from the...
So what do you remember? Do you remember the covered bridge when you were growing
I
up?
remember the covered bridge. I remember going over it. I remember going with my uncle, Louis P. Downey. We always called him Uncle Downey.
Hmm.
He was an interesting fellow, sort of a semi-soldier of fortune, I would call him. He had been in World War II. He actually served with Claire Chenoweth as a mechanic for the Flying Tigers.
Oh, wow.
But he suffered a lot from debilitating diseases from being in the South Pacific, as did my other uncle. And so he was having his good and bad days, but I can remember going down and under the bridge, walking down the riverbank with a gunny sack while he was pulling turtles out of the dens back under the bank and throwing them in a gunny sack. And we take those turtles down to his house, and there was a building there at one time that had been a service station. I think my other uncle possibly tried to run a service station at one point there. And the old gravity gas pump was still there when I was a kid.
No kidding.
In those days, when you got gas, they put it in a tank, usually underground. Then they would pump the gasoline up to what they call a glass globe over top called a visible gas pump. And you would say, how many gallons do you want? They'd pump it into the glass globe, and it would have gradations on it, so you knew how many gallons you were buying. Then they would gravity feed it into your car.
Oh, wow. I've always
So-
wondered how that was done in the past. Now I know.
So the old pump was still there at the gas station
Right.
building. It was a small building.
So where was this in Beverly?
This was located right on Files Creek on the south end of town.
On the south end of town.
This is a house that my Aunt Virginia and Uncle Downey built. They lived in that house for a number of years.
What did the house look like?
It's probably just a very nondescript, almost, it's kind of a jerry-rigged Cape Cod style, I would call it.
Gotcha.
It's not a very pure style. It's odd looking, I think.
But it's not there.
It's still there.
It's still there. Oh.
That's where all those cars are
That's where all the cars are.
sitting right now. And Uncle Downey built a basement separate from the house. It's like a flat top. The basement's there, and it's got a flat top over it, which we would go up and sit on in the evenings, and sometimes eat our meals up there. Outside, it was next to the house.
Now, when you took the turtles there,
Well, the turtles went into the little building.
gotcha.
He had a big wooden packing case, and he put them in there and feed them lettuce and vegetables. And then he would decide he'd kill one and we'd have it for dinner.
Wow.
Or he would can it. We had canned turtle meat in the wintertime.
Did you like it?
I liked it. It was
I've never had
really
turtle. I want to try it.
Uncle Downey was a connoisseur of game food. He ate nothing but game food.
Wow.
We ate, venison. We ate squirrel. We ate rabbit. We had wild turkey. I still to this day own a turkey call he gave me as a little kid. You suck on it, it makes the turkey sound.
Wow. For some reason I'm really stuck on this turtle soup thing. So how do you make turtle soup? Obviously you
just
shell
chop
it.
up some turtle and
Just
stew it.
chop it up.
You always serve sherry with turtle soup. But we ate turtle, like chicken. It tastes a lot like chicken.
The outside seems like it would be. Do you have to do
It's
something?
skinned. It's skinned out.
It's skinned. Okay, yeah, that's what I was thinking. You'd have to. I'm sorry to be so ignorant about turtle soup, but I'd like to make it sometimes, so that's why I'm asking. So you
Well,
skin
it's
it.
hard to get people to do turtling anymore.
Yeah.
You got to know what you're doing. You got to know they go in head first, and you can reach in and pull them out.
Huh.
And it's a scary job. If you don't go in the right way, you can get a turtle snap on your finger, and you might be in bad shape.
So the turtles that you would eat were snapping turtles?
Right.
Well, I have
They're
a
not
whole.
land turtles. They're not box turtles or
Right.
anything like that.
I have a whole
They're-
pond full.
They're as big as a platter. They're huge.
Right. Yeah, I've got some in my pond that big.
Yeah, they're big ones.
Yeah. Good eat.
So they used to be, they were in Maryland where I currently live. They had turtle farms, and they're now not lawful. You can't do it. In fact, I don't think you can have a turtle meal. You used to be able to get in Annapolis 40, 50 years ago, but you can't any longer.
Interesting.
I used to get snapper soup in Cambridge, which is on the eastern shore. It's on the Tygart River. I worked out at the state hospital years ago, and I would go for lunch and have turtle soup.
I
And
guess once you get a
snapper soup.
taste of it, you want to keep.
Well, I enjoyed it. It's very good. I like game food myself.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my experience with my Uncle Downey. He had some sort of neurological problems developed from his diseases he got in the South Pacific, and he trembled a lot, and he liked to target practice with pistols, and I would go out and hold his hand so he wouldn't tremble when he'd shoot his pistols. And my dad got wind of that. He had a tirade over that situation. No, we're not doing any more of that.
I'll bet.
I loved it.
I bet you did.
Oh, I loved it. So I always enjoyed him quite a bit. He spent quite a bit of time in the VA hospital in Clarksburg because of his medical condition. He ended up, they lost their home. My aunt became disabled and eventually in a nursing home. He spent his last years in the Tygart Hotel.
No kidding.
He died in '66.
So was he convalescent in the Tygart Hotel?
No,
or
he was in bad health financially. They lost everything. They didn't have anything. They lost the house.
Oh.
They had paid the taxes, couldn't afford the taxes. I remember my sister came up here and bought some of the family furniture and things that she wanted. And she lived in Seattle, so it was all shipped out there to her. But he had gotten rid of most everything. On one of my sojourns, when I was at Washington University, decided to go to Florida. I hitchhiked in a snowstorm down through Beverly, and I get to the snow's maybe 18 inches deep, and I'm in no traffic. So I wait in there. I hadn't seen my uncle in probably 20 years, maybe not that long.
How old were you when this was happening?
I was probably 19 or 20.
Gotcha.
So I was hitchhiking, going to Florida. And I go in and I go up, knock on the door, and I said, Uncle Downey, I'm your nephew. He said, really? He didn't recognize me. And I probably had not seen him in 15 years.
Right.
And I said, can I spend the night? He said, come on in here. So we sat down, we had a dinner of squirrel. And what he was doing at that time, which I felt was interesting, all of his buddies who hunted around Beverly would come in and bring him game food. He would trade it for home brew. He can make home brew. I mean, I used to cap it for him when I was a kid. And that's what that basement was for.
Well, under here, that's what this basement was in the 50s. It was churning out moonshine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he was making home brew.
He was making beer
Yeah, it
and
was
stuff
beer.
like that. Gotcha.
And we had quart bottles of Canada Dry bottles.
Wow.
And he would siphon it off out of these huge crocks. He made up and when it was ready, we'd get down, he'd siphon it off in these bottles, and I ran the capper.
Where did he grow his hops, or did somebody give him the?
He got the ingredients. I don't know where he got. I don't remember that. I was too young to know that. But he knew how to do it, and I kind of liked the taste of it. He'd give me a little glass of it, and I would sip on it. I liked it.
I bet.
I gained a taste for it.
Now, around that time, do you remember this house, the Chenoweth House?
I knew this house existed. I knew who Lemuel Chenoweth was because it had been discussed with me.
Yeah.
In relationship to the bridge that existed there at that time. This is in 1947. I came up even a little later and spent a few summer times in the summer up through, probably till grandmother died. I would stay, and that was 1953, she passed away.
Were you here when the bridge was dynamited?
No,
You
I
weren't.
missed that.
Oh, gotcha.
They said if they realized how much dynamite it took to do it, they should have left it alone.
Oh, absolutely. It was just fine, wasn't it?
The minor repairs was all that was necessary. It was superficial.
Right.
from what I've heard.
Yep.
I did years ago past, I came up here after the bridge had been demolished and the new bridge went in.